Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I have been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August 2019. All right, folks, welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about three positions that, as the team is currently constructed today, I don't think they should consider at number 56 overall. Three positions that, without projecting, they make any big moves via trade, the additions they can make in free agency, the three positions that I don't think you can make any argument for them at number 56 overall. I think the first one is fairly obvious. I mean, for one, we're not even going to mention quarterback. Quarterback would clearly be there. The Jaguars have their franchise quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. They're not in a situation like the Eagles were when they took Wentz. Like when they took Hurts in the second round, when it was pretty clear that Wentz, both on and off the field, wasn't really developing into the guy that they thought would be their franchise quarterback. Jaguars aren't in that situation. Jags love Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence loves them right back. He's coming off the best year of his career, and he looked truly unstoppable over the second half of the season. And, I mean, he picks up one more yard on a fourth down play against Buffalo. They probably win that game, and who knows what happens, in the rest of the playoffs. But clearly the Jags are set at quarterback, so much so that it doesn't even fall, on this list. I think the first one, it has to be wide receiver. As the Jaguars roster is currently constructed, there is no way they could justify taking a receiver at all at number 56. I don't think they can justify taking one in the top 100. Because unless you're moving Brian Thomas Jr., if you do that, if you trade Brian Thomas Jr. for whatever reason, and I've told you guys before that I think that'd be the wrong move. That I do not think the Jaguars should trade Brian Thomas Jr. But doing so is the only scenario where I think you open up a spot for a receiver and makes sense for them at 56. Otherwise, you have Thomas Jr. as the X. Clearly, the speed guy, deep threat, big body on the outside. You have Jacoby Myers, just signed to a big extension not very long ago, who's going to play a big role on the offense for, obviously years to come. He's great at working the middle of the field, which is what Cohen's scheme, really asked for a lot of. Him and Trevor Lawrence have fantastic chemistry with one another that showed up really time and time again last year as Lawrence kind of had his resurgence. The Jaguars and Lawrence's resurgence kind of happened and coincided completely with the addition of Myers at the trade deadline. And with the Jaguars' ability to add a guy like Myers to the offense who could serve as a security blanket for Lawrence in the red zone, in the middle of the field. Then you have Parker Washington, who, simply put, the Jaguars could not justify in any possible way entering next season without Parker Washington as a starter on offense. He led the team in receiving. He was fantastic. Multiple 100-yard games down the stretch. Was a giant reason they won that game in Denver. Was a giant weapon against the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs. And he just made some of their biggest plays throughout the entire season. Parker Washington was a critical piece of what the Jaguars did all year long. They have to enter the year with him as one of their most important players on offense. And that's not even getting to the Travis Hunter topic. Hunter was the number 2 overall pick a year ago, in part because obviously they're going to expect him to make some plays at wide receiver. So one way or another, I think receiver Do they need some depth options, perhaps, to fill out the room? 100%. Tim Patrick and Yami Brown are both free agents. You need to replace, I'd say still replace those two guys. I think you need 6 receivers if Travis Hunter is in the room. So I think beyond receiver, another position I don't think they should look at number 56. This one might be a little surprising. I'm going to say safety. I think the Jaguars have enough to build on from their young safety room last year to justify waiting until later to take a safety. That later can even be in, if they took a safety in round 3, I'd be like, okay, I can understand that. I don't think they can take one at 56. If you're taking one at 56, then you're punting on either Antonio Johnson or much more likely Caleb Branshaw. Antonio Johnson's going into a contract year, and maybe they don't have plans of re-signing him, and they want to find his replacement now and sooner rather than later. Okay, I can get that argument to an extent, but I don't think you use the number 56 pick like that. Antonio Johnson had such a stellar year for the Jaguars last season that I think he's kind of like the defensive version of Parker Washington. Can you really justify him not starting after the year that he had for them? I have my doubts. I think Antonio Johnson needs to be a starter next year. And if he doesn't play to as high of a level next year, then yeah, you obviously don't resign him or anything like that. But it's not just him. I mean, Rayon Lane had some really encouraging plays at safety on defense throughout the year. He, I think, did more defensively than anybody probably would have gave him credit for entering the season, myself especially. And it's not like he played a lot of defensive snaps. These are just flashes and little windows of opportunity. But he impressed. And then I think Caleb Branshaw, they don't know what they have in him. They obviously loved him coming out the draft, but didn't play a snap last year because of a foot injury relatively early on in training camp. And that was a big blow. The fact that, they didn't have one of their top draft picks at all to see any kind of sample size from him. Yeah, that's never an ideal thing. They need to know what they have in Branshaw. They need to see him on the field this year because they saw absolutely none of it a year ago because of his foot injury. They don't know what they have in Caleb Branshaw. They need to learn. They invested such a high pick in him. They need to learn this year, what do they have in this guy? Can he be a starter? If not, what does he need to improve on? Can he improve on it? And if so, where does he really go from here? Finally, I'm going to say linebacker. I really believe linebacker is a position, and it's not to devalue it, because I personally think like linebacker and corner, after quarterback, are some of the hardest positions to play in the NFL. You have to do so much. Offenses are so dynamic, have so much window dressing. But I'm not sure I can be sold that a linebacker at 56 will be better than Ventrell Miller in 2026. And teams have shown, the Los Angeles Rams specifically, where James Gladstone and Liam Cohen have a lot of influence from, have shown that you don't need to be drafting a linebacker in the top 50, top 75 for them to make an impact. You can get guys later in the draft. You can get guys in free agency on certain deals. So I just believe that Ventrell Miller, who has flashed every time that he's played and who hasn't been a liability and who was fighting with Devin Lloyd for a spot on that starting defense before Devin Lloyd kind of walked away with it toward the end of the season. I mean, not the end of the season, toward the end of the training camp. So for that reason, I don't think the Jaguars can justify a linebacker at 56. And that's with me factoring in Devin Lloyd leaving. Devin Lloyd returns it. I don't think you even draft a linebacker. If Devin Lloyd leaves, I think you have to draft one and consider it in the third round. Consider it in the fourth. I don't think you should think about it at 56. With so many important needs in the trenches and at cornerback, I just don't see linebacker as one that makes much sense for the Jaguars at number 56.